Well, I mean, we can confirm that the president is under duress. He had no natural desire to launch a regime change war against Iran. He understood the risks perfectly well. He feared those risks. He told me that. And he did it anyway. So he did it against his will. That tells you a couple of different things. One, that there is some, yes, sinister mechanism by which the president of the United States was forced to do something he didn't want to do. But it also tells you that the president of the United States, whoever it is, Trump or the presidents that preceded him, don't really run the country, that they have a boss. And again, that's the kind of realization that leads to societal collapse and revolution. Once people realize the system itself is fake, not just that bad people are running the system, but that the system itself isn't what it claims to be, then you're kind of shaking the foundations of the society. So I don't know. I know that about Butler. I know that Trump shut down the investigation into Butler. That is a fact. Dan Bongino told me that when he worked at the FBI. And Dan Bongino himself was terrified when I spoke to him in December. It's such a long, boring story, but basically I came into possession, I beg your pardon, accidentally came into possession of a lot of the social media posts that we were told didn't exist that were posted by Thomas Crooks in the months and years before the shooting. And I was amazed that the FBI had lied about this. So I called Kash Patel, and I later called Dan Bongino, and I says, what is this? I'm not attacking you. It was the previous FBI administration that did this. It was Chris Wray, but what is this? And Dan Bongino became hysterical with me on the phone. I've known Dan a long time, for many years, and always gotten along with him, whatever his faults, nice guy, certainly very nice to me. I never had a problem with Dan, ever. And that problem began when I brought this information to his attention, and he became a different person. He was clearly terrified. I didn't get it at first, but he was hysterical. And ultimately, after a long series of text exchanges, which I still have, and phone conversations, he said, look, take it up with Trump. He's the one who shut down the investigation. And that was, I think, the first or second week of December. I think it was the beginning of the second week of December. I have it written down. But that was the moment and I realized, oh, wow, there's no good explanation for shutting down an investigation into your own attempted murder. Like, this is not what we've been told it was.
When you said Trump feared those risks, he told you that. What risks do you think he was referring to? What was he fearing?
He was responding to my description of what I thought the risks were, and they were in order that if you achieved your goal and regime changed Iran, if you took out the leadership of Iran and the country collapsed into some kind of ethnic civil war, because it's only barely 50% Persian, there's a lot going on there. It could be an unstable country. If you did to Iran what we're trying to do to Russia, would that be a win? No, because the weapon stockpiles would fall into the hands of people you couldn't control. You would have a refugee crisis that would further destroy Europe. You would have a lot of downstream effects. You would also, and I said this to Trump, inevitably get a lot of direct attacks on your 6 Gulf state allies on the other side of the Persian Gulf, who are our main allies in the region. And they can't defend themselves, and we have reached the limit of our ability to defend them. And in the end, the United States could lose a lot of influence, if not its physical presence, in the Middle East. And places like UAE and Qatar and Saudi, which are real allies and have invested trillions in foreign direct investment in the United States, those countries could be wrecked. And so there's kind of no upside in doing this. And then, of course, the Strait of Hormuz would be shut. By definition, it would be shut, and 1/5 of the world's oil and at least as much natural gas and sulfur and all these different petrochemicals and commodities the world needs, the global economy needs, would end. And you could tank the global economy. You could wreck markets. And so I said all of this to him. And he said, I know. And said a few things that were so nihilistic that they led me to believe that he had no choice at all. Like, he knew Trump is not stupid. Trump is light on detail, doesn't care about detail, makes stuff up. He's, of course, a compulsive braggart. All of Trump's faults are on display. But he has a very high comprehension of certain things, and one of them is risk. Like Trump understands risk. That's why he's still here at 80. And he knew these risks. He thought them through. I don't know if anyone else had presented them, but I did. And this was like 10 days before the war started. And he knew it, and he did it anyway. So I thought then, and I think now, he did it against his will. Now, what's the mechanism by which he was forced to do this? The donors were up in his face, all the Zionist donors. Obviously, Rupert Murdoch, who, for the record, is not Jewish, was the most aggressive of all of them. And I said to Trump many times, Rupert hates you. I worked for Rupert for 15 years. I know him very well. I actually still like him, but he despises you. So if you're taking advice from people who despise you, it's probably a trap. This will wreck your administration. This will destroy your legacy. You won't be able to do anything. I mean, George W. Bush had all kinds of plans for reforming Social Security and a lot of other things. And he's remembered for the one tragic mistake that he made, the Iraq war waged on behalf of Israel. I said this to Trump. He knew that. And I said, you could easily be George W. Bush, very easily. But Iran is more than twice the size of Iraq. So like George W. Bush 2X, you want that? But he did it anyway.
Do you think he was misled into it, tricked into it, or forced into it? Forced.
I think he was forced.
Pressured.
Into it. I mean, of course, look, they've been putting pressure on Trump, his donors, Miriam Adelson, Rupert, Benjamin Netanyahu, since the first portion of his first term. They pushed him to kill Soleimani to get out of the Iran deal. I mean, this has been coming down the tracks for more than 10 years. And I've been staring at it as it approaches. And I've been talking to Trump about it for 10 years. So it's not like out of nowhere, super clever people surrounded Trump and said, I've got an idea. You want to, enhance your legacy. You want to make America truly great again? Launch a regime change war against Iran. Like, that's not how it happened. He's been under consistent pressure, which he has withstood for a decade. And then at the end of February, he flipped 180 degrees and did this thing. So, yes, I mean, look, I was in Washington for the inauguration. I was with Trump at the inauguration, went to church with him that morning. And the very first visitor to the White House was Benjamin Netanyahu, very first. And that was the first of, I think, 8 trips to 8. I think that may be 7, but I think it's 8 to Washington in less than a year and a half. So this was already going. Like this was already planned out by the inauguration. I mean, think about it. Mike Waltz was the national security advisor, the first national security advisor. Obviously, Marco Rubio was the Secretary of State and now the acting or official national security advisor. Like John Ratcliffe was CIA director. Like from the very first day of the transition, and I was at the first meeting in November, the first Wednesday in November after the election, those spots were occupied by people, to my shock, who wanted war with Iran. So in retro, and I didn't fully understand it. I was really stunned that after that whole campaign in which Trump said again and again, including standing right next to me on stage, no more forever wars, no more pointless wars in the Middle East. We're going to actually do something about our country. We're going to turn our attention and our money to your concerns. We're going to make this a better country. We're going to make America great again. After all of that, he would put Ratcliffe and Marco and Walz, like all of whom I like personally, but that's not the point. The point is these guys are ideologically committed and paid and have been their whole careers to support a regime change war with Iran. And they had the national security posts. It was like mind-boggling to me. And I didn't understand it. Now I do understand it. The fix was in. So I wish I had understood that earlier, but I didn't. Yeah. So basically, as of November 5th or 6th or whatever the date was, that Wednesday, we were on track for a war with Iran. That means that for the preceding whatever period, Trump was on board with it too and lying about it. I mean, this is all becoming clear to me with some distance. I didn't have enough distance from Trump to really see this clearly. And I like Trump. I've always liked Trump, like as a person. So that makes it even harder to see it. But no, I think it goes back to at least Butler. And by the way, the second the Butler shooting happened, all these people who were not Trump supporters became public Trump supporters. Now, at the time, I thought, well, they just admire his bravery in the face of gunfire, which he displayed. I just want to be clear about that. The guy did get shot in the air. That's real. It wasn't a blood packet. That was absolutely real. He behaved in this incredibly manly way that I admire. I talked to him that night and he had his wits about him and he was calm. I admired that. I still admire that. So like, that's all real. But then you have to think like, I don't know, something about that moment was the pivot.
So I'm in the belief that after the war went so badly, you know, he was planning a short war, and which is just crazy to me. And then once the Gulf got struck, once the Strait of Hormuz got struck, once he saw Iran's capabilities to keep firing missiles day after day, he realized it was a mistake, and he started to pivot. He started preparing to walk away, trying to get an MOU, and even distancing himself from Israel. Some people called me naive thinking that, but I've been very optimistic since even before the ceasefire. As soon as he started making those tweets about wiping out civilization, I'm like, look, seems he wants an off-ramp. I don't expect Trump to really destroy the energy infrastructure of Iran and the Gulf. But then I see what's happening yesterday and today, that we're back into, you know, Trump talking about firing at, I think Wall Street Journal reported that Trump wants to attack Iran on a daily basis. That's no longer a ceasefire. Do you think Trump is trying to walk away right now, or he's in a completely different mindset and he wants Cargill and he wants this to continue?
Well, I want to be clear. I haven't spoken to Trump since the day or two before the war began at the end of February. So I don't, you know, so I
Have you tried to reach out?
I've not. No, I'm not. I'm not. I don't hate Trump, but I'm, you know, this is the worst thing that any president has ever done. From the perspective of American interest, this reduces American power and our standard of living more profoundly than any single decision any president's ever made. So, you know, at some point as an American, I just don't support it. And no, I'm not going to call him. Not because I hate him, but because I'm so sad about this and I so strongly disapprove of it. So, but I'm only saying that because I just want to be clear. I don't know what Trump's thinking because I haven't talked to him, but I do know him well, and I've talked to him a lot over many years, and I agree with your analysis. I think Trump convinced himself he went into his happy place, which he does, and he convinced himself this could be like Venezuela, and he could get it over with quickly at minimal cost and be, you know, greeted as a liberator or whatever here and in Iran. And when it didn't happen, he was angry at Israel. I absolutely agree with you. I think he sent Marco Rubio out over to the Congress to blame Israel, which he did. It's the first thing. It was really, literally one of the very first public statements the administration made within 2 or 3 days of the war commencing, was that we followed Israel into this. I don't think Marco would have said that without authorization. I just don't believe it. That's such a heavy-duty thing to say. It's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, among other things. It's also a fact. But I don't think he would have said that unless it was mirroring what Trump was saying in private. Okay, so that's one. So I do think he's always disliked Netanyahu. Always. I think everyone dislikes Netanyahu personally. I think Mrs. Netanyahu dislikes Netanyahu more than anybody. So, I mean, like, disliking Netanyahu is a kind of universal, you know, it's a universal blood type. But I think that that's intensified, and I think he feels trapped. So, yes, and Trump has this very unattractive but recognizable quality where he blames other people for his own failures. So I do think he's blaming the Israelis. I'm sure he's mad at Mark Levin or all the other buffoons, Mark Thiessen, all these other low IQ creatures around him affirming his bad instincts. I'm sure he's blaming all of them. I don't know that, but I know him. I'm sure he's blaming JD, you know, or whatever. He's a blamer. But fundamentally, he can't get out of it because of the geography of the region. And if there's one thing that I've always noticed about American policymakers is they don't look at maps. And they have no sense, especially now that we're all living in a digital world, they have no sense of physical reality. And, you know, Iran's place on the map, occupying the majority of the shoreline along the strait, gives it power that's pretty hard to do anything about. You know, no matter how many $120 billion aircraft carriers you have, you can't move Iran, which is right across the water from Oman. It's there. So Iran is an economic power more than anything. And we just didn't recognize that because, again, people are way too up in their own heads with their own theories and everything's on a screen. But just like look at a map. Iran it doesn't matter whether they have nukes or not. they are physically on this choke point at the eastern end of a fifth of the world's oil supply. So it's like, it's a powerful country no matter what you say, no matter what you do. Iran is powerful now. It'll be powerful in a year. It'll be powerful in 100 years. As long as people use petroleum products, hydrocarbons, Iran will be powerful. So like, anyway, Trump realized all that, I think, within a day or two. And everything since has been him kind of speaking his frustration out loud. The problem is that, you know, when you're the president, a wartime president, as he now describes himself, it kind of matters what you say in public. Trump has promised since March 23rd, 38 separate times that we were on the cusp of a deal with Iran. I checked yesterday, 38 separate times. And of course, there's no deal, and there won't be until the United States feels such profound economic pain that it has no choice but to make concessions that would have been unthinkable in February. For example, allowing continued control over the strait. Oman and Iran will share control of the strait. That was not true in February. It's going to be true probably for the rest of our lives. And there's really nothing we can do about it. So he has to accept that, and it's hard to accept. Now, will Israel accept it? Will Israel, at the end, whoever's leading the country, whether it's Netanyahu or the next guy, be able to look at his population and say, we're going to have to share the region with another power center that's not going away, nukes or not? And I don't know if they can. I don't know if, like, emotionally they can. They've talked themselves into such a state, such a grandiose state. You know, in Israel, I know a lot of people in Israel, and every time I talk to them, they tell me the same thing: is that everyone here thinks we run the world. And those are kind of like the sentiments you have right before you blow up your life. In a man, that's called hubris. You know, I'm so powerful. You know, yeah, I've got 3 girlfriends and my wife doesn't know, but like, great men deserve a harem. Like, this is how men think when they're in this state of hubris. I mean, I'm 57. I've seen a lot of it, but it's also how countries think, how people think collectively. And Israel is in that state, and it's not because it's Jewish or Israel. It's like, this is how people are. All people are capable of this. The Israelis, the Malaysians, us, everybody. And they're in this state. And it is, in effect, a self-destructive state, because pride goeth before the fall. You know, it's like, so I feel sorry for everyone involved, including, I mean, obviously, I think the government of Israel is disgusting and they're genocidal, and I hope they're brought to account, and I hope the people who've committed genocide and murder of children are punished for it. And like, I'm not endorsing Israel, obviously, but as a human being, I do feel sorry for the Israelis, because they're about to find out the hard way that no, they're not a superpower. They're the tiny little country in the Levant of 9 million people who are committing grotesque crimes, and you can never get away with those forever. And they're not going to get away with them forever. They'll be punished for this big time. And so I feel bad for them, because they don't know that yet.
When you say they'll find out, you mean Trump will change that relationship? Because we're seeing a bit of a power struggle, at least in the media, like the Axios call between Trump and Netanyahu.
Yeah, I mean, I think for whatever reason, Israel has complete control over Trump. And
still
through
now.
its proxies. Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, we shifted, I'm not guessing about this, we shifted missile defense from our actual allies in the Gulf, our most faithful allies in the world, the allies from which we receive the most benefit, and that would be the GCC, the Gulf states. We shifted missile defense from them that would be defending Doha and Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Riyadh. We shifted it to Israel. And they know that. They're very aware. Trust me, they're very aware of that. So in the middle of the war, we did this. They have nothing to do with this. They're just bystanders, and they're getting destroyed. Israel started this war. And so you would think, well, they can defend themselves. They want a war, go ahead and have a war. Good luck. But we shifted our missile defense from our actual allies to Israel. So that's the clearest possible illustration of who's in charge. Israel's in charge. They control Trump. Trump does not have sovereignty. But the arc of justice is long, and there is justice in this world. If you commit crimes, you will be punished for them, period. That is always true. And life, for most of us, is this whole process of denying that, but it doesn't make it any less true. So I always feel sorry for the criminal. Not because I'm a liberal, I'm not, but because I'm a human being, and I know that there's weeping and gnashing of teeth at the end. The more crimes you commit, the greater your suffering. And Israel's committed a lot of crimes. And so I know I'm often called an anti-Semite or an Israel hater. I'm neither one of those things. I'm just a person who believes in justice and decency and hates the murder of innocents. They've murdered innocents. They'll be punished for it. Sorry.
Yeah. So what do you make of the Axios call then? So it seemed pretty, at least to me, it seemed pretty obvious there was something happening. It wasn't all for show. The attack by Iran on Israel. Yeah, even when Iran attacked Israel, the US did not intercept Iranian missiles. I think that's the first time that happens as well. Trump made it clear to Netanyahu the US would not be involved. So maybe I'm being hopeful, but it seems maybe Trump, to save himself politically, or just because he's upset, he's changing that relationship in some way.
I mean, that's certainly the hope if you're an American, not because you hate Israel or Bibi or anything like that, but just because this is really destroying America and you want America to win. Those are my feelings. I'm just skeptical. Yeah, of course, Trump despises Netanyahu. He feels tricked by Netanyahu. He feels used by Netanyahu. And not just Netanyahu, but there are a lot of people who work on Netanyahu's behalf, putative American citizens who are working for Netanyahu, loyal to Netanyahu and not to Trump or the United States. And I think Trump's mad at all of them because he's in this spot. And as I said, he's blaming them. But the question is not, is he mad? Does he understand that he got tricked or led into a trap? Yeah, he does understand that, I think. The question is, what does he do about it? And really, you could end this tomorrow. So Iran, to its great credit, in my opinion, I'm not pro-Iran, but I certainly agree with this, has tied a ceasefire to a ceasefire in Lebanon, the country from which you come. One of the prettiest countries in the world, a country that's done nothing to anybody. It's really been a victim of its own proximity to Israel for the past 75 years, and it's been destroyed by Israel, or as an effect of Israel's actions. And it's being destroyed again. And they're bombing, as you well know, they're bombing not just southern Lebanon near the border with Israel, but they're bombing Beirut, probably the prettiest city in the world. And they're destroying it and killing people who did nothing wrong. And Iran is really the only country in the world that's trying to do something about that. So we're not having a ceasefire until Israel stops bombing Lebanon. Well, Netanyahu has just absolutely flat out refused. And to the extent that he's tried to pull back from Lebanon, he's been attacked because, newsflash, Netanyahu is not the craziest person in Israel, not even close. He is also subject to political forces within his own country. He's a moderate, actually, within the spectrum of Israeli politics, just like Putin is in Russia. If you think Putin is the most dangerous anti-Western guy in Russia, you know nothing about Russia. So anyway, Bibi is under tremendous pressure to keep the bombing campaign going, and the only person who can actually stop it is Trump. And he could call him tomorrow and say, that's it. You're getting no missile defense. You're not getting another dollar. I will veto any funding for Israel.